On this video, we're going to be looking at mergers and takeovers and looking at the differences between them, looking at how they're financed and how in practice merger and takeover battles take place, a bit like chess. Let's get the terminology straight. Integration could involve either mergers or takeovers. It's just where two or more businesses are brought together. A merger, strictly speaking, is where those businesses agree to integrate. So company A and company B join together to become company AB. An example would be when British Airways and Iberian Airlines merged and they became the IAG, the International Airlines Group. No reason why one of the names should have been dropped, but they decided to go for a completely different name. Note that they still trade under their own original brands. A takeover, on the other hand, is where one business gains control of the other one. So either A or B will disappear. They become the owner. One way of doing it is by gaining 51% or more of shares. Now, the point about takeovers is they might be nice and friendly. In other words, the company being taken over might want to be taken over, or it could be hostile, which is where it gets interesting. Let's go through the takeover process. Now, the terminology I'm going to use, the company that is taking over is going to be called the predator company, just like a lion is a predator. And the company that is being taken over, or where there's an attempt to take over it, is going to be called the prey. So let's imagine that the prey has 4 billion shares. The current share price is £2, which makes the company worth £8 billion. So the predator firm might first of all buy up bits of the prey on the stock exchange. Now they can do that up to 30%, but once they've got 30% of the shares, they must make a formal takeover announcement and offer to buy up all of the remaining shares. So they've got to persuade the existing shareholders to sell to them, which means that they're going to have to offer a higher price, a premium. So for example, they might offer to buy the shares at 220, which would make the value of the company 8.4 billion. Now immediately we've got a point there as to why this merger might go wrong, not the process itself, but they've got to now get 400 million additional from that company once they've taken it over to make that investment, because it is investment. You can analyze it via investment analysis to make that investment worthwhile. The target board have then got to respond to that offer. Now, either they could recommend to their shareholders to sell, in other words, they're happy with the takeover, in which case it's a friendly takeover, or they can recommend to their shareholders not to sell, in which case we are at war. And this is where we get the terminology of chess involved, because the predator firm is sometimes called the black knight, and there's going to be other sorts of knights thrown in later. There's white knights and red knights and grey knights, but the only one we're going to be interested in is the white knight. So what might the prey firm do? Well, they could persuade their shareholders not to sell. Now they could just ask them, or alternatively they could offer them a special dividend. So in the example I've given, the predator firm has offered a premium of 20p per share. So maybe we can offer our shareholders a special dividend of 30p. Alternatively, they could get in with one of their mates, a company called a white knight, who might be persuaded to take them over. Now you'll notice that they are still going to be taken over, but this time they're going to be taken over by a friend rather than an enemy. So the predator has offered a premium, the prey has responded with a special dividend. So of course, what could the black knight do? Well, they could offer an even higher price, for example, £2.50 a share, which would mean valuing the company at 10 billion. That's going to mean that they've got to get an awful lot back from that company once they take it over to recoup that extra 2 billion. And the target board might then turn around and say, fair enough, that's a decent offer for our shareholders. That then becomes a friendly takeover, or of course they can reject, and the process will continue until either the price is too high for the black knight, so they withdraw, or the target accepts, or a white knight emerges. So how might it be financed? Well, this is where we can look at internal and external sources of finance. They could finance it via equity. Typically, what would happen there is that the predator would offer the target shareholders equity in the company. So, for example, if the predator has equity worth 15 billion and the accepted takeover price is 10 billion, then the shares worth 10 billion pounds would be offered to the target shareholders. And again, just like when we look at internal sources of finance, if you have a new shareholding, it means that the existing shareholders will have their shareholdings diluted. So, for example, let's say that a major shareholder had 1.5 billion pounds worth of shares in the original company. Remember, the original company was worth 15 billion. So that shareholder will own 10% of the original company. But now they've got 1.5 billion in a 25 billion pound worth company. So now they only have 6%, because 1.5 billion is 6% of 25 billion. So their shareholding has been diluted, their power has been diluted from 10% down to 6%. The alternative to internal sources of finance, equity, is external sources of finance, for example, a loan. So the predator could approach banks or the financial markets or for loan capital to buy up the company. Or alternatively, they could say to the target shareholders, right, you're no longer shareholders, but we now owe you money, so they'll offer them interest-bearing bonds. Now, again, the negative side of that is exactly the same as it is on sources of finance. That if you've got loans, that means your gearing goes up. It makes you more vulnerable there. You're a slightly higher risk. And of course, you've got that necessity to pay back the interest on the loans, either from the banks, financial markets, or the old shareholders. And that's it on the process.